Richard, dairying and debt. You have got a pretty good opinion on both now.
Yeah, two things pretty closely tied up at the moment. Obviously, dairying has always been a high value industry, and in recent years with the boom happening, more people getting into it and more people expanding, and a lot of bank borrowing and lending being involved with that whole process. Now that the returns have made a bit of a downturn, a lot of people were getting into a position that certainly no one wanted to be in. A few may have hedged against the possibility of it happening, but probably not to the extent that it's gone to at the moment. With the consequence being that we've got a lot of people who are facing a financial position that really isn't tenable. So what we have suggested as a partial remedy or a part remedy for that is a farm debt mediation bill, as is an amendment to the Receiverships Act. It's in the name of Ron Mark and it's sitting in the ballot at the moment. What it does is to replicate some of the farm debt mediation laws that exist in a number of provinces in Canada, a number of states in Australia, and now we understand a couple of states in the US as well. It inserts another stage into the process where a farm hits the wall. Instead of the receivers being called in straight away, there is a regulated mediation and renegotiation process that is required to take place. So the banks are then required to come and negotiate with the farmer, look at the business model, see if there's a way through it without going to the ultimate extent of foreclosing on the farm and throwing people off the land.
How far through is it, or how far away will it be?
Well, it needs to be drawn from the ballot. We've suggested to the government a number of times that they pick it up and put it on the order paper themselves. They've so far not been keen to do that. I know it was suggested to the National Caucus by one of their members a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago. They weren't interested then, they don't really seem to be interested now. We're saying that this is a time we need to do this because there are so many farms, so many farmers in a precarious position, and with the state of dairy pricing at the moment, it is going to get worse, and it's going to get a lot worse over the next year and a half.
Richard, there's figures being bantered around like 100,000 small businesses in New Zealand which are vulnerable because of dairying at the moment. Can you take your Mediation Act a wee bit further and give them a chance?
Yeah, I mean, see, that's the hidden side to this crisis. I think Joe Public sitting in the cities, a bit distant from the agricultural scene, from the reality of farming, don't understand that there aren't just 10,000 dairy farmers at risk here. There's all the workers who work for them, the businesses that depend on them. And that's the essence of the heartland. And if these farms start tipping over, sure, they'll be bought by someone. It doesn't necessarily mean they'll stay in the model of farming that they've been in traditionally. A lot more foreign owners will come in because A, it's allowed, B, they're the ones with the money. But you have entire communities that depend on the flow through from the earnings of farming. Everyone from contractors through to suppliers, local primary schools, those sort of things. The heartland's going to be under real pressure.
Let's look at irrigation, because that's another area where there's the odd question mark over, and there's those that want it and those who are saying we shouldn't be spending money.
Well, I have to confess I'm a little biased. I spent 5 years in the irrigation industry prior to going into Parliament, 2 years in Otago and 3 in Canterbury. And towards most of the new projects that we were doing were connected with dairy conversions, but not all. So the issue with irrigation, I know it's a bit of a cliche, and I don't have any skin in the game anymore, so I can say this. No one ever regretted putting in irrigation. It's a business that stacks up. When you put more water on, you get more production, and it pays for itself. And banks have known this for a long time. That's why they'll lend on it. So we don't have an issue with a lack of water in this country. What we have is a lack of storage, and up until now, a lack of systems for distributing it. So if we can capture the flood volumes that would otherwise get wasted rushing out to sea and put them into storage ponds, storage lakes, upcountry, use those to feed irrigation schemes through the dry season, use them to keep the rivers running and keep it healthy, everybody benefits.
That brings us back to this 100,000 small businesses type scenario. South Canterbury with Lake Opua, the whole of Timaru went, yay.
That's right, yes. And if we look at Canterbury, if we put another metre and a half on Lake Coleridge, that'll keep all the schemes going, even in the driest of years. Ruataniwha is another one that's had a lot of criticism. Now it's going ahead because they've got ACC as a strategic partner coming in with the money behind that. The naysayers, I think, are focusing on one potential downside of one potential use for that water. And everyone talks about dirty dairying. Of course, you and I know that the reality of dairying is it's not dirty. There are some bad eggs in the basket, but only a few.
Very few.
Very few, a very small number. And actually, the industry itself is well aware of what its responsibilities are and has been for some time. You know, having worked in the industry, I've seen farmers write, you know, six-figure checks for effluent containment and dispersal systems. I think there's a gulf of knowledge between what's actually happening on the farm and what many in the public believe is happening. And that's partly, I guess, down to some in the mainstream media aren't keen to tell the full story. And of course, there are people with vested interests who don't want the truth to be told. But, you know, amenity values from storage of water benefits everybody. Keeping the rivers flowing, as I say, benefits everybody, benefits the fish and the other life that live in those rivers. Storing water and regulating its outflow and using it to increase production is something that everyone gains from.
Briefly, forestry.
Look, we have an enormous resource in this country, planted very deliberately, nearly 100 years ago, by a government that recognised that, you know, there was all this land doing nothing, and we could grow trees very well. What we've got now is an industry that should be one of our most valuable. Unfortunately, we are not extracting the best value from that industry that we can, the best value from that resource. Far too much of our forestry resource leaves these shores in the form of logs. We're totally opposed to that. All the value, or most of the value, in a tree comes in the form of processed products. It takes something like 7 shiploads of logs to equal the value of 1 shipload of sawn timber. We have as a policy a domestic log price, so that local sawmills can get access to the logs that they need in order to create the products, create the jobs, create the wealth, keep that wealth in the New Zealand economy. It's an absolute no-brainer to be exporting logs in an unprocessed raw form. When you look at who's buying them, and everyone says, okay, the log trade with, you know, China in particular, China's taking, or has this demand for this vast volume of logs. They're not buying them because they want logs. You know, they're not building log cabins. What they're wanting is the products that those logs can be made into. And it's absolute folly for us as a nation to not be selling them those products, rather than simply selling the logs to make them themselves.
Richard, thank you very much indeed. You're talking niche rather than commodity.